guys in the dark.
My story begins years ago when I got married to my first husband. Well, me and my first husband were going in different directions, but during this time we were still friends. I did mention to him that it might be best if we got a divorce. I'm not saying that I was an angel, because I wasn't. I had a one-night stand with a guy who turned out to be another stalker, but I digress. So I knew a group of people from work who loved to party, and we're all in our early 30s, so why not? At that time, I used to have the biggest crush on this guy, Craig. He was funny and from Boston, with his cute little accent. We both worked in D.C. and were federal employees. At this time, too, I lived with a roommate, Dina, and she lived with my husband, Jay, and myself. Although I still loved Jay, me and him grew apart, and he never wanted to spend time with me or my friends. Because of this, I spent a lot of time with my friends and my coworkers. And my infatuation with Craig grew, and I remember one of my coworkers telling him that I had a crush on him. One time, he invited me and my roommate to watch the fireworks in D.C. from his apartment complex in Virginia. We both went, and the entire time he was trying to grab my butt. It was odd because he always acted like he hated me before and loved to humiliate me, but this time it was different, so I let it go. Fast forward a couple of years. My roommate moved away back to New Mexico, her home state, and I stayed in Virginia, and I'm still living with my husband, but now we no longer had the buffer of a roommate, and it was obvious that we were incompatible. I felt trapped in a marriage, and like a slut, wanted to have another affair, except the guilt would kill me, so I would get in situations where I was about to leap, but never did. So one day, I get a text from Craig. Him and the gang were meeting at a local bar or pool area, and did I want to come? I thought it was odd because after my roommate left, they barely ever invited me to bars, but I went. When I got there were all these people I knew from work there, and I felt comfortable, and Craig asked me to join him. All of us were at a pool table, taking turns and drinking. Craig had such a funny way about him, and could make anyone laugh, so that day was no different. He had me rolling on the floor. Little by little, people left until there was only about 3 couples there, and me and Craig. Craig got us a small table and kept buying me drinks. He got behind me and was hugging me and kissing my neck, and it felt strange to do this at the bar because all the people knew I was married. We kissed and held hands, and he said I was the most beautiful woman in the world to him. It had been so long since a man had looked at me like that I did not object and just went with the flow. Eventually, my conscience got the best of me, and I left the bar. The next couple of weeks, Craig would show up at my desk and play pranks on me. It was usually something stupid like reprogram my keyboard, or once he hid up police tape all over my desk because I had borrowed his hole punch and not returned it, so it looked like a crime scene. It was so funny and cute. I did stuff to him too. Me being Mexican showed him a casserone egg, and when he asked me, "What do you do with that thing?" I told him, "Come here, and I'll show you," and then smashed it on his head. Boy, did I pay for that one. One day, Craig calls me again and says the gang was getting together again that night, and did I want to join them. I was going to the gym that night and would be all sweaty, so I said no, some other time. He kept asking, so I finally gave in, and after the gym, I just went to the bar to meet up with the gang. When I got there, I found out that me and him were the only ones there. I asked him, "Where is everyone else?" He said, "I knew if I told you that it would only be me and you would not come, so I lied to you." I was a little upset about it, but not enough to think twice as to why he had set it up like this. I still had the crush on him after all, so we played pool and stayed there quite late. After many, many drinks, I was way too drunk to drive. He lived down the road, and I lived like 20 to 25 minutes away. He said, "Come to my house so that we can sober you up with some coffee." I agreed and followed him. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This was stupid, but I'd known him at this point for like 10 years, and he had never done anything to me except humiliate me 2 or 3 times at a bar. Got inside his apartment. He started a pot of coffee, and then he put on some music. I sat on the couch and started to fall asleep. He sat next to me and began to kiss me, Things went so fast from there, and he eventually got on top of me and trying to take off my shirt. He got my shirt off, but not my bra. So he pushed that up and began to bite me everywhere. And he went wild and began to tug at my jeans, but I kept telling him no. He was so drunk when he finally got my jeans off, he forgot I had panties. So he was never able to penetrate me, but he tried. The entire time I was in shock. I couldn't believe my friend of 10 years would try this on me. I finally got in a position where I was able to push him off of me with my legs, and once I was free, I grabbed my clothing and purse and ran out of there. He was caught off guard and ran after me. I was crying the whole time. I ran to the elevator naked, putting on my clothes as I was in the elevator. He leaped into the elevator entrance and asked me what's wrong. I was crying and stayed in the corner of the elevator and told him, "Let me go, Craig, please." He pushed back away from the elevator and said, "Okay, I won't hurt you," and the doors closed. I got home, my humiliation was complete. I came in crying, and my husband Jay saw me, and he was upset, but not mad. He was very logical about it, and said he wanted me to report it to the police. I knew what would happen. They would ask why I was in his apartment, and I just couldn't go through that, so I did nothing. I called in sick for 3 days. I had bite marks all over my neck, on my breasts, and my legs, my stomach. I had bruises on my arms and inner thighs. I knew eventually I would have to go back to work. I covered the marks that were visible with makeup, but still, it was humiliating to have to come in at all. I hung the shame of it all every day, that I had to come in after that incident for a couple of weeks. The first day at work, I should mention he sat on the other side of the partition with me. I was in a high state of panic and anxiety. He shows up at my cubicle worried. He asked me, "I thought you were deadly sick or something. I'm glad you are back. Can we talk in private?" I turned my back to him and told him that I wasn't up to that yet. Like this for a long, long time. Like 3 to 4 months. He finally corners me one time in the break room, and he's making a scene in front of the other employees and says, "Do you not want me to bother you then?" I tell him yes, just don't bother me. During this break, I had to travel for my job for 3 months, and he traveled too, about 3 to 4 months for his job. During the travel period, I moved out of the apartment I had with my husband and asked him for a divorce. I bought a new vehicle, and I let Jay keep the old car and any furnitures that he wanted. I needed the break to clear my head. I called around during that time and found a roommate who lived in Maryland. When I came back, Craig was still on travel, and his travel was extended for another 3 to 4 months, and I don't let grass grow under my feet. I started to date again and found a guy who I liked and began a serious relationship with, Nathan. When Craig finally came back, he was real angry. He knew that me and my husband had filed for divorce, but I had started seeing another man. He called me at home one time and asked me, "Why are you doing this to us?" I pretended like I didn't know what he was talking about. I told him, "There is no us." He got real sad and said, "What do you want me to do then?" I told him, "Date other people." He asked me, "Will this make you happy?" I told him yes. I introduced him to a friend of Nathan's. She was cute, but a handful. She calls me up one day to tell me that he is moving in with her to Maryland. I was glad, but it didn't make any sense. He hated Maryland. He called me later that night and said, "Okay, I have a girlfriend. Now what?" I didn't understand him. "I don't know, Craig. Get to know her better. Move on." He tells me, "Kayla, I have to talk to you. I need to know what happened that night." I would just get panicky and tell him no. Almost daily he would call me to complain about Patsy and say that he wanted to see me again. I could not tell him where I lived, but he eventually got my apartment phone number and would call that if he couldn't contact me via cell phone. Him and my friend Patsy dated, and then I would get calls from her and him about the relationship not working. So I was the mediator. She would call me to tell me that he was being a total jerk, and he would call me to tell me that he missed me and didn't like Patsy. I kept telling them to try again. Finally get a call from Patsy, and she is crying and saying that Craig was leaving her. He was moving out, and she couldn't stop him. They had only been together for like 2 or 3 months. I called up Craig and asked him what was going on, and he told me, "She's crazy. I can't live with her, not even for you. I'm done." I was mad at him, Craig, you promised to try this time. He said, why can't we be like it used to be? I would never let him finish, and he said, I need to talk to you, Kayla. Please. Some time passes, like 2 to 3 months, and Patsy is still upset about Craig. She asked me to call him up and find out if we can all meet up at a bar in Virginia, where he was living yet again. I call him up, and he says, are you coming too? I told him yes, of course. He continued, I'll only do it if you promise me you will talk to me about that night. I agreed, but I told him, but you need to promise me that you will be nice to Patsy and show her a good time. Promise? He promised me this. We showed up at that bar in Virginia. I came with Nathan in tow, and Craig was pissed off about that, and showed it by saying, you didn't tell me you were bringing him. I said, you never asked me. So we all sat in silence. After about 30 minutes, Craig pulls on my arm and says, you promised me a talk. I tugged my hand back and said, you promised me you would be charming. And suddenly, he was the most charming guy in the room. He had everyone laughing, and it was a hoot. After about 30 minutes, he tugged on my hand and said, okay, I kept my side of the bargain. Now let's have that talk. I told everyone we would be back. We went outside, and as soon as he had me alone outside, he had me pinned to a wall with both hands on either side of my head. He says, you owe me an explanation of the day you ran out on me. Him talking to me so close to me brought all the pain and humiliation back to me. I said, Craig, you know what happened. He said, Kayla, you know how I feel about you. I told him, stop it. You know I was still married. You know I told you that I was trying to save my marriage. When I came home that night after seeing you, Jay saw all those bite marks and bruises on me, and he wanted me to call the police. I wouldn't do it because I felt a loyalty towards you, and I couldn't believe you had done that to me. He leaned into me. What did I do? I began to cry and say, you tried to rape me, Craig. He was truly shocked and said, no, I would never hurt you. I love you. I have loved you for a long time. Everyone we hung out with knew I loved you, but I knew you were married, so I waited. And then I heard from your roommate that you and Jay had talked about splitting up. I thought that your marriage was over. I told him it could have been so different if you hadn't done that. Now I can't let my guard down with you. I can't trust you. You become this mean, spiteful person when you drink. He began to cry and said, but I love you so much. I said, I can't love you because I can't trust you. After this conversation, he left. Months after that, he moved to a different agency, and 6 months after that, I heard he got married and moved to England. I'm so happy for him. I'm hoping that he moves on and doesn't worry about me anymore. About 2 years ago, I went on a couple of dates with someone over the course of a few months. A few troubling things happened that made me question and ultimately decide to walk away. Laura hid that she had a 6-year-old. I had stated before meeting that being 21 at the time, I did not wish to date someone with a child because I wasn't ready. She brought the child to my place of work, where I was a manager, so I couldn't truly react to how fucked up it was. She was overly interested in finding out about anything traumatic in my past. She used the fact that she worked with inmates and troubled people as a reason for being fascinated. She said she was in love with me after barely knowing me, and admitted to having a lot of extreme psychological problems. I ended it. Laura completely lost her mind, and after a while stopped trying to speak to me. That's when things got weird. First, flowers were sent to me, but they were sent to my parents' house. They were my favorite flowers, lilies, arranged in a bridal bouquet. My work started to get hang-up calls when someone would ask for me, and then hang up before they could connect to me. After that started happening with calls to my cell phone as well. Then I got a 10-page letter sent to me, again to my parents' house. It was a kind of birthday letter. The packet included pages of poems about me that were all deeply disturbing. The letter was about how she still loved me, was convinced we wouldn't be married, and regretted how things went. Expected me to die soon, etc. Creepy as hell, I know. I contacted her and told her if she ever spoke to me again, I would contact the police. A couple months after that incident, someone got in my car and left behind a CD that was a solid mix full of songs I actually liked. I assumed it was my best friend, but when I ejected the CD, it was Laura's handwriting. I realized that I might know where my spare key went and snapped the CD in half. I started to get followers on social media that were what looked like throwaway accounts. One solicited me to come live with them and used a writing pattern similar to Laura. A lot of them did, subsequently, made all social media private for a while. I moved. I started thinking I saw Laura at places I went, including my university. Laura wasn't a student. Someone breaks into my apartment during this time, and all that's out of place in the fact that I'm missing a hairbrush, some of my writing I perform, slam poetry about being stalked, and a tube of what was my favorite lipstick during the time of that doomed relationship. I move yet again. Brought to my attention that Laura has taken the sketch of a tattoo I was planning to get and had it tattooed on herself. She made a post about how someone she loved very much wanted to get it, but couldn't. I still don't know what she meant by that. Fast forward a few months, and it is almost my birthday. I get a phone call from a number that I don't recognize, but it is late, and I'm relaxing with my partner. A voicemail is left, and I decide to listen to it, which I never do. It's Laura. She's crying and saying she needs to talk to me, that some shit has gone down. I scroll through my voicemail log and notice dozens of voicemails I never listened to from this number. I have a medical bill I haven't been able to afford to pay. I assumed it was a debt collector. The next morning, my cousin, who is a sister to me, contacts me to say Laura contacted her under false pretenses, and she didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. Laura got a job at the prison in the town I went to high school. This drive would be over an hour from where she lived. She lives near where I go to university. A prison that I mentioned held the man who abducted and did horrible things to my cousin's mom. She used that information to contact my cousin, and then confesses that she still loves me, and if she knew how to contact me. My cousin lives several states away, and didn't realize who Laura was. I decide that is enough. I bite the bullet and confront Laura directly. She admits that her and her new partner have been stalking me. They go to performances I'm at, follow me when I'm on dates, when I'm out with my friends, when I'm alone in remote places taking pictures for projects. When I'm at school, she tells me that she bought a ring from Tiffany's and has booked a wedding photographer for our wedding. That she tells everyone about her love for me and how I just needed time to be young. My stomach dropped. I panicked. I lost my complete fucking mind on her. Tell her that I will have my brother. We're actually estranged, but no one knew this at the time. Who happens to be a cop will find her, and she'll go to prison if she doesn't stop this. Of course, it's really hard to prosecute a stalker. Nothing is done about it. On my birthday, she makes a public post about her love to me. It was paragraphs of shit about how letting me walk away was the biggest mistake of her life, and she'll fight every day of her life. My blood ran cold. I still get phone calls. Sometimes I get gifts. I've stopped going to spoken word events. I've stopped going to bars or anywhere really. My partner and I are planning to move thousands of miles away soon. I can't help but feel no matter where I go, Laura will be there, waiting and watching. I sent in a story about my ex, Nathan. In my story, I told you about my overdose, but I didn't get too far into detail about it. It's all a big haze to me, but I want to try my best to describe it, as well as the following months to you all. Some of these moments were told to me by family or doctors. Others are my own recollection of what happened. I was 16 at the time. My life was about to fall apart in the coming months, but I didn't know what to do. All I knew was him and his love. The first memory I have after downing all of my pills was Nathan pretending to be my hero. He ran out to my mother, screaming, "She took her pills, all of them!" And my mother called him a monster. Everything, for a little while, is just black. My mother told me that when the ambulance arrived to take me, they asked if I had been suicidal. Even delusionally full of pills, I still didn't tell any of them Nathan made me take them. I told the medics that I had been suicidal for as long as I could remember, and begged for them to let me die a slow, painful death. Of course, they took me into the hospital. I was on suicide watch the whole time, and had volunteers watch me every hour I was there. It started with them forcing me to vomit. I filled nearly 2 buckets with bright blue puke, according to my dad. The doctors told my parents if I had taken even 10 more pills, there was no way they could have been able to save me. Next came the hallucinations. It started mild. My mother told me that a nurse came to check on me, and I smiled at her and asked to pet her dog. She said yes, and I called the dog into my bed and started petting the non-existent puppy. She told my parents that it's fairly common for people in my situation to hallucinate animals, and that was probably as bad as it could get. But oh, it did get worse. I thought one of my nurses was both my girlfriend and her brother. When her mask was on, she was the brother, but when it was off, she was my girlfriend. I begged her to marry me constantly, even asking her brother for permission to. She was as nice as she could be in this situation, telling me when I get better that she would. Slowly but surely, my time there turned sour. Instead of dogs and pretty women at my bedside, it became doctors pulling blood bodies across the floor in the hallway in front of me. I was convinced they were going to end me and sell my body for food. One day, when my mother was visiting, I kept slamming my head into my bed, and when she finally got me to stop, I leaned over to her and aggressively whispered, "Mom, they're poisoning me!" She insisted they weren't, but in my mind, the IV bag they had attached to my arm glowed a bright blue, and every injection they put into me looked like black or toxic green. There was a painting in the hallway. I don't remember it very well. I remember, however, leaning over the volunteer watching me and asked her, "What do you see in that painting?" She happily responded, "3 little boys. Why?" And I laughed loudly and said, "You fool! I see a little boy, an alien, and a little girl. Neither of the kids knew that it's an alien, and neither do you. That's why you're going to be taken by them instead of me." All of a sudden, all of the staff were extraterrestrials. They were well disguised, but I apparently saw right through it. I kept ripping my IV out of my arm, and therefore had to be cuffed to the sides of the bed as not to further damage myself. Even with the cuffs holding me down, I managed to break them off with my teeth over and over again, pulling the IV out so much my arm was bruised up and down the entire way. I sincerely feel bad for this part. At one point, a nurse came in to feed me. I had refused to eat the entire time I had been there. About 2.5 weeks at this point, I fought her off of me. She called in for a backup because I had severely hurt her. At one point, there were 7 nurses in there trying to get me down. I fought them all off for an extended amount of time, giving one a black eye and kicking one in the throat. I thought the food was poisoned, and the nurses had to have been evil for giving me this wretched food. I don't remember much after this, but I remember apologizing to all of the nurses one by one. I was in a wheelchair for a while after that, because my legs stopped working at some point, probably because I didn't move out of my bed for even a minute my whole hospital stay. I was in a mental hospital for 2 weeks following that. My heart rate was insanely high the whole time, and I never got outside time because the sun would make me vomit. I barely ate, and every day I thought about death. I've been in there for a month, but at my 2-week mark, I was so sick of being in there that I went to my therapist and told her that I can't be in here anymore. I'm telling you this now. I'm 100% more likely to end myself in here than at home. If you keep me in here another day, I swear it'll happen. In hindsight, it wasn't the best idea, but they discharged me that day. When I got home, my room had been stripped down to just a bed. Nothing else. My ceiling fan had been removed as well as my door, and all of my other furniture. I was on constant watch by my parents for the following 2 months. My mother had been my only source of hope in this time. She gave me time on her Kindle and computer, and let me see friends, where my dad wanted me completely isolated from everything until Nathan had fully left my mind. I ran away with Nathan about a month after my overdose. After I returned, everything was, well, normal. My mother planned her birthday party, and I started getting privileges back. A month passed. I woke up to crying and screaming, and ran to my parents' room to find my mother dead on the floor. They said she died from cardiac arrest and caused by a carotid artery. I looked up the cause of that later on and found out stress is one of the biggest things that can make a person from all of that. Even 5 years later, I still think it's my fault she passed. I have her picture on my wall and even got a tattoo for her anniversary of her passing. I regret my past heavily, and if the story can tell anyone anything, it's that suicide isn't the answer. It never is, no matter where you are in life. I'm now 21. I just moved into my best friend's house and have an amazing new boyfriend who treats me like his whole universe. I'm doing better now. Nathan didn't destroy me, and neither did my attempt. So I went to the grocery store to buy some milk and eggs today. I was wearing a cute pair of shorts since it's spring, and I like to show off some skin during the warmer months. I was hoping to get some attention from some cute boys, but instead, I ended up getting attention from someone that I didn't want it from. The guy was about 5'2", chubby, balding, and what hair he did have was extremely greasy. The guy smelled like cheap beer, liquor, and marijuana, and as if he hadn't showered in a couple of months. He had facial hair, except it was patchy and disgusting, and only grew under his chin. My friend Haley describes him as what you would call a neckbeard. I wasn't expecting any interaction with this guy to be for very long. Maybe a polite "excuse me" so I could move past him, and that would be the end of it. Oh boy, was I wrong. The simple interaction turned into this guy following me through the entire store, and even into the parking lot. I honestly thought this guy was going to attack me. It was one of the most terrifying things that I have ever experienced. The guy following me would try and get my attention, and every time I ignored him, he would shout things like, "You effing bitch, and I'm a nice guy, just give me a chance." After he tried to get in my car, I decided enough was enough. I locked the doors and called the police before he could get in my car, but by the time the cops got there, the guy was already gone. They took my statement and told me that they would call me if they heard anything or found the guy that was following me around. I haven't heard anything from the cops after that. It wasn't until, about a week later when the news story came on TV, and I saw this guy's picture on the screen. There was a capture reading, "Child predator set for trial next week. Multiple human trafficking charges filed." I felt my heart move into my throat. Being only 18 years old, I was terrified of what could have happened to me. After the day I watched the story on TV, I felt not only relief, but also fear at the same time. So, creepy guy that followed me around the store and tried to get into my car, let's never meet again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.